Right, so I always love to talk about bands like Contrarian because I pretty much followed the band from the announcement of the first EP, which was back in 2014 or so, um, where, of course, I'm always following anything that resembles old school progressive death metal. I grew up kind of worshiping early atheist and sadists, and those are some of my favorite records to this day. So a band like this appeals to me in every way. Well, they're quite a bit down the road from 2013 or so now with this record, Sage of Shekhinah, however you pronounce that. Um, it's so every record of theirs is different in an appreciable way. The first one, well, the first EP and the first record had the leads from Leon Macy of Mithras. It had drums from George Colias, best known from Nile. Uh, Colias eventually did the vocals for the band for several years. I had a gripe with that at the time, but I kind of liked it after a while. I really appreciate To Perceive is to Suffer Now. I reviewed Their Worm Never Dies. And the gist of it is that this is an ideation of 90s progressive death metal, which never falls into the art metal category, but much more the Florida school of it as it expanded throughout a little bit to Canada, a little bit here and there, and got a couple of new ideas. Now, the effect of their sound and their approach does still land somewhere between independent thought patterns and a more modern style, but it still reads in the spirit of classic progressive death metal. And I think that if you are not familiar with the classics, this could be actually a great introduction to get you jumping back into Cynic and Death and those kind of bands. But to someone who already knows what they're talking about and has already listened to all these records and is looking to hear what this new one is all about, I think we can go right to the single, to the clip, and we'll go from there. So the previous Contrarian record, which from Only Time Will Tell, I didn't actually. I thought that I reviewed that album. I don't know how I didn't, but I just didn't. And it definitely took on a prettier, a more cynic feeling, um, illustrative style, which brought some of the melody they'd offered on in 2019 and expanded into what it was kind of their Elements record in a lot of ways. You either liked it a lot or it was a bit different. And this record continues to develop that melodic voice and move away from the riff salad that a lot of this style of music can incur on induction when you first step into it. I think that their use of time signatures is so much smarter than it needs to be that it could just float past without notice and just be a beautiful thing. I think that's the best way that a progressive death metal band can be, is to have those layers 100 deep. And when you're ready to go there, or music is that interesting to you, this is the kind of band you could really dig into note by note and get a lot out of. So for me, I'm much more interested in the effect of it and the lasting value of listening to this thing over and over. That was kind of my focus here, and I would liken this experience to a little bit of Stargazer and the way that their rhythms shift and enchant in various ways, and then the more run focused, bombastic side of Augury, which are those are not such different things spiritually, but they are in practice. And I think that Contrarian really gets there by way of a sound that recalls, to me, again, I always mention A Vision of Misery because I think that the this particular bassist gets there in terms of his style, but also the new vocalist here has a little bit more of a rasp to his voice, and I think that suits Contrarian perfectly compared to the more guttural side of things, which only variously works depending on the release. So a lot to talk about here. I don't want to get too deep into the lyrics, and because I haven't fully read them, but the themes are spiritual and philosophical, and much more kind of Middle East and focused on some Greek and Roman philosophy, philosophers who are pretty interesting in ways that sync up in curious ways. So I'd really like to know more about the record in that regard, but for now, I think that there's the implication enough that this is we're seeking a very interesting goal here, and I'm there for it. This is the kind of thing I love in death metal. Um, so there are definitely just points on this album that are exceptional. There's some that flew by me early on and sort of worked better later on once I was more familiar with the thing, kind of a normal progressive death metal thing. So this is a high recommendation. It will probably, it already kind of has boosted up in score over time. This review is from a couple days ago even, but that's just the process of change as a constant. So nonetheless, this is one of the better death metal records of the month. It is a record I could go on and on about, and one that I definitely recommend. For the fan of progressive death metal who maybe has felt this was kind of an inconsistent group in the past, I'm kind of there for, like, with you in that regard. But as I look over their discography and I see where they've ended up with this record, I think that the variety is of listening experiences within their discography has kept itself very interesting as I've gone back 4 or 5 times and reassessed the whole thing. So I really like where they are with this record. I think this is one of their most effective records thus far. But yeah, go back to Polemic and all that too. I think it's really cool to see where they've been and where they are and what personality sticks overall in hindsight. So much more detail in the review. Go check it out.